Hey Tim, how's it going?
Hello, it's nice to see you, Sean. I was can I say before we begin, I caught a little bit of the previous guest. I was immensely moved by John's testimony. I thought it was brave and extraordinarily pertinent, actually, to some of the things we're going to be talking about. Mostly the idea that you can't just shuffle off and silence these things. You've got to talk about them, and the process of healing takes a long time, and the abuse of power is so phenomenal and is getting worse and worse in our society. So I think it's very, very relevant, and much love to John, and all praise for him coming on and talking, and for you having him on. I think it's tremendous. So thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, there's nothing more powerful than hearing these first-hand accounts from the survivors who are brave enough to talk about them. But before we get into it, could you just tell the viewers a bit about your work and your mission?
Oh, I was recently shoved into the limelight by appearing on a reality TV show called The Circle. I never volunteered to go on it. I was headhunted, and the show itself was lovely, but the aftermath was catastrophic, and the feeling of a loss of agency, the feeling of manipulation. And that sort of ties into a lot of the things which are now coming up, or now coming out, particularly through Byline Times, about some of the issues we're going to be talking, some of the people we're talking about anyway. But we have to tread very carefully, because these are just allegations.
I think we got to dig a bit deeper into what you've said there. Are you saying that were you set up? Did they have an agenda on this show, and they portrayed you in a strange light or something?
Well, they always have an agenda, but did they portray me in a strange light? No, I had a very good edit, which makes my concerns very interesting, and I sort of won the show. So the fact that I'm speaking out, I saw people, I know people who were seriously damaged and seriously hurt, and the aftercare simply didn't exist when I was there. Although it was supposedly there, I rang it. I was left for 10 days without any help. Other people I know rang it and were similarly rebuffed. So the whole idea that there is aftercare. But frankly, if you go in for any job and you're then told, oh, you're going to get psychiatric aftercare, there must be something wrong with the job. And what is wrong with the reality TV job is, in order to get that drama, they put you through a sort of what is frankly torture. If the British Army did it, it would call it R21 technique, and it would deprive you of heat, it would deprive you of agency, it would deprive you of freedom. It would give you noises all the time, and heat, and so on. And in the end, you are compliant. It's like being in prison. It's like being incarcerated. It's like being held in detention as a refugee or whatever. And my partner was a torture victim. So when I came out of the show, my partner said to me, "Oh, well, that sounds like what happened to me." And I thought, you're quite right. And we'd gone into all this 20 years ago, and as it was happening to me, I simply hadn't realized. So yeah, I think the government has dismissed this. The government was looking into the Caroline Flack issue and the Jeremy Kyle issue, and it only heard testimony from, I think, 53 people, and most of those were production staff. And then Boris called an election, and the whole thing stopped, as it would, and it was never reconvened. But a rule was produced which effectively gave production even more control. So what you've got, as I said, is a loss of agency. And when somebody, I was giving my phone number to people on the street because I was so compliant. But so if we then move on to the Dan Wootton stuff, if I want to tread very carefully.
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah,
we're going to go there. Let me just.
You're persistent.
Okay,
very good.
About 4 years ago, I was working with someone who was regularly appeared on This Morning, and she told me what was going on with the runner, and we put a video up, and legal told us to take it down right away because this guy's trigger happy with the lawsuits, etc. Yep. I'm just wondering why now, years later, this is going to lead to Wootton. Why is it suddenly open season on all of these people getting exposed and all of these allegations coming out? It was like every week something was coming out on a new person there all of a sudden. for 1
Because
month.
I think that the problem is it's now believable, and I don't think it's I think of course the Sun and all these newspapers love the lurid details and the tawdriness of it all, but I think it's really about an abuse of power, which is why I think you've been so clever to put John on just before me, because he's talking about the same sort of thing. It's about people in power who just cannot resist using that power. And I don't think a lot of the time they realize what they're doing to people who are vulnerable, to people who look up to them. And, there's a story which has come out today. The Byline Times has said that Wootton had encouraged various reality TV stars to pose for him, allegedly, and I think suddenly I only saw this a few minutes before coming on here, and I was shocked because suddenly my two worlds collide. There's a fellow called Kirk Norcross, a fellow called J.J. Bird, and it seems that there's nothing criminal here. Wootton invited them for a photo shoot. It took place in his home, which seems very odd. And then he suggested, would you like to do nude photography? Now, I don't know whether this is true. We have to say allegedly all over the place. But again, it's about the abuse of power. This is a man with extraordinary control. And these people have come off a reality show and they have lost agency. And that's the issue. They will do anything, because that is how they have been coerced into behaving. I feel so sorry about the pressure that must have been put on them, because it was certainly put on me. And I mean, I was never asked for a photo shoot, but yes.
What is the psychology behind it? Let's look at Hugh Edwards, for example. He allegedly went and met somebody, and he's so famous. He's getting paid 6 figures. He must be worth millions. And why would you risk everything to just go out and meet someone? Is there a thrill that you could lose everything? Is that a component behind it?
Well, I don't know. I'm not Hugh Edwards. I'm not Phillip Schofield. I'm not Dan Wootton. I'm not anybody of that caliber. Are people at that level in television thrill seekers? Maybe they are, but I think there's a simpler explanation. They just assume they can, and they're surrounded by people who are so desperate to say yes to their every need, because television is a very stressful medium, and Hugh Edwards is married to Vicky Find. She runs the Peston show or something. He's got this history of depression. I think, how do you... We can't see into his mind, but I think he sounds, by all accounts, to have been a very sad man off screen. And sad people need crutches. I think it's extremely worrying that he was looking to a allegedly 17-year-old, but if this was on some sort of dating app, that person would come across as 18, perfectly legal. But is it moral? Is it the right sort of thing to do? I mean, at the back of your mind is the question: do I actually want this person in my living room every day? Do I want this person announcing the death of the Queen? Now I know all these grimy details about him. It doesn't matter whether it's legal or not legal. Is this the right level of moral rectitude that we would want from somebody reading the news? There was a time in Hollywood where Hollywood directors would demand that their actors taking key roles were confined, and they had to maintain a special image. If they couldn't maintain that, then it was manufactured, it was wholesome, it was invented, it was controlled. We can no longer control people. And maybe we've always had people who are out of control because they have so much power, but we just didn't see it until now. Now it's slapped across every part of the media because of social media. We can't resist it. It's sort of, It's in your face. And because the mainstream media is so reluctant to say anything, because it's so lawyered up, it doesn't mean that we don't hear all these stories, because they're all over social media. And other people get hurt with the speculation. So, with the Hugh Edwards thing, Rylan, I remember meeting Rylan. He has enormous teeth. Rylan and who was the other fellow? Jeremy Vine. But there were other people whose names were being bandied around all over Twitter, all over TikTok, that I've only just discovered. And it's shocking. Nobody is safe. And maybe that's the issue. Maybe these people were always out of power, out of control, because they were given so much power. And maybe the issue is we shouldn't be giving them so much power.
So you're talking about barometers of morality, and in the case of Wootton, he went in on Schofield. Schofield went in on McAlpine. What is this like? They're trying to hide behind deflection techniques.
Well, so is the government, of course. I mean, the whole Bibi Stockholm thing is a deflection technique. So if we're hating this group of people, we're probably not hating Rishi Sunak. He hopes, but the Phillip Schofield thing. There is a point at which you would say, well, if Phillip Schofield was straight, would there have been so much of a fuss? And there is a way of saying, well, maybe this is a homophobic attack. It's a tawdry story about inappropriate behavior, but it's got this frisson of gay. It's sort of naughty and speculative, and who is this person and what's going on the sofa. I think, again, it gets to the same thing, that these people are presented as being our mates, our friends, and they're sitting on a sofa together with the illusion of being practically a married couple, and there's this whiff of hypocrisy and nuance which doesn't fit with the image which ITV and BBC want to present, which makes me think that image is simply something that nobody can really live up to.
So if you've joined us on the live stream, we're talking to Professor Tim Wilson. If you have any questions for him, wherever you are watching this in the world, please put them in the chat and we'll get them to him. We've got about 15 minutes left. And the first question is from Marie. And she says, where is it again? Wootton is still on GB News. Are his superiors too woke to do anything about it?
What a brilliant question, Marie. I think the GB News people would be horrified at being called woke. It's rather like calling Dan Wootton unimportant, or Dan Wootton. I'm pronouncing his name wrongly, I think. But I think GB News. GB News ought to look at the Mail. The Mail have suspended him. Why is GB News? And surely it was Wootton, who said that we should be suspending Phillip Schofield. The allegation is enough. Well, the allegation clearly is not enough for GB News, but they probably pumped out so much money to pay for Wootton to fill the airlines that they can't afford to replace him. Who would they replace him with? There's not another MP waiting in the wings, is there? Marie, I think that's a wonderful question. You're very naughty.
Yeah, put your questions in the chat. My question is, where's this reservoir of beards coming from? Because it seems all these guys, they're married, they've got kids, and yet they're off allegedly doing this other stuff. And the beards, stick by them. And what's this?
It's a brigade of naughty Santas, isn't it? Really. I don't know. Phillip Schofield made a great meal about coming out, and we're all supposed to be very sympathetic about that. Hugh Edwards seems to have some unconventional sexual appetites. As far as we know, he just goes around to people's houses and makes tea, which is very nice. But he also seems to be revealing his boxes. I don't know whether that's something that Santa would do when he comes down the chimney. But yes, the beard thing. As for Dan Wootton, there's no beard there. He's in your face, or at least in the living room and getting his camera out. And Philip Edwards. Part of the problem with Edwards and part of the problem with Wootton is the amount of money that seems to have been running around the place, allegedly. In the Edwards case, it's the £35,000. And you start to think, well, are these people so desperate that they need to pay for their services? Or again, I look on these people and I think, well, they seem very unhappy individuals, and probably what they need is a friend rather than a bank account. But I don't know. The other thing is gossip, and gossip spreads, and you've got to ask the question: do you want to hear the gossip, or do you want all that stuff to go on behind your back? Now, my personal preference is I would like to hear what people are saying about me. And yet we've got these legal parameters, and we're treading so carefully. And organizations like Byline Times, which simply aren't funded to the level of The Sun. The Sun clearly got it wrong. The Sun was backtracking and changing its story all the time with Hugh Edwards. Byline Times have stuck to their story, but they've stuck their neck out. And yet, so much of this stuff is across social media, and nobody can stop it. So if I were Dan Wootton, if I were Hugh Edwards, if I were Phillip Schofield, I would want to know what is being said. And I would want to, I suppose I would want to get ahead of it. I would want to, I wouldn't want it to occur in the first place. I wouldn't want to put myself in a position where these stories would come out. I think I don't know. I've had a very colourful life, and I'm sure stories could come out about, but most of them I think I'm in control of. I know I was a goat herder. I know I was a monk. I don't think anything inappropriate went on in either situation. But I'm open to the storytelling, and I'm sure there will be people who will tell tall tales.
So if Schofield, for example's co-workers knew what was going on years ago, and hence his bosses and everybody else knew, what is the calculation here as to why these people are protected for so long? Is there like some kind of cost-benefit analysis performed whereby we've had this guy as a main host for decades, we've got all this invested in the brand, if we can just rinse the last as much as we possibly can out of him before the value of the scandal hits us and depreciates us more than the value of perpetuating the myth? Do you think that they run a financial equation like that?
I think there must be some serious talk. I think in the case of all of these people, you can imagine the conversation where senior production was saying, "Well, who would believe it?" And the problem is almost anything is believable in the end, and that I think is the issue. And there's an aspect to all three of the stories which doesn't get a lot of airtime because it's not as lurid and as sensationalist, and that's the fact that all three seem to be linked to this sort of aggressive behavior, this sort of bullying, allegedly. And one of the reasons why maybe it doesn't make the headlines is perhaps because Boris made bullying acceptable by, overlooking any criticism of Priti Patel. Suddenly, you've got a free-for-all for aggressive behaviour. I think that's worrying, but it is certainly one aspect. Why are we so excited by the lurid details, and we're not looking at the fact that people have been stepped on in this desperation for power, and to keep hold of power. Once you've got it, how do you release yourself from it?
We've got a statement from Jane M, which we're going to get you to comment on. I think if they were so depressed or had mental health issues, they all have enough money to pay for therapy rather than pay for services.
Well, I think they do, but that doesn't mean that they're not depressed. Hugh Edwards has got a history of 20 years of depression. And I think if Philip Schofield was not depressed before, then he's certainly depressed now. Dan Wootton, I have no idea about his mental health, but uh, but you know, there's a bit of me which just feels a great concern for these people, but I feel far more concern for their victims, for the people that they have abused so badly, allegedly. But even if they haven't abused them, these people still are hurt. So why, you know, this is where production should be coming up and saying, look, let us help you, because it's under our aegis that you feel that you've had this experience. So whether it's directly from these three people or not, it's our responsibility to look after you. And
next question is from Shirl's Puzzles. Does Wootton believe he is untouchable because he has so much info at his disposal that could be used? His power is knowledge, so to speak.
Well, there we are. There we are. I have no idea. As I say, I cannot get inside Dan Wootton's head. I don't think I'd like to go there. I don't think it would be a very attractive place. I'm sure he's a very scared man. But the allegations are pumping out, and some of them are extremely sensational. Does he think he's untouchable? Well, GB News keeps using him, but then GB News keeps using Jacob Rees-Mogg and Esther McVeigh and all these other people. I'm sure they think they're untouchable. Nadine Dorries on Talk TV probably thinks she's untouchable. She certainly doesn't feel that she has to turn up for her day job anyway. Jenny Pearson. Oh, Jenny Pearson's got one.
Yeah, it's a question in relation to Hugh. Would the parents of the 17-year-old have complained if their son had bought a car with the money instead of drugs?
Again, how can we get in the minds of other people? But I think you go back to the story that John was telling, and there's just something very, very disturbing about a 17 or 18-year-old child in a relationship with somebody who's the other side of 55, and a relationship that certainly doesn't seem to be entirely platonic. I think if I were a parent of somebody who was involved in that sort of thing, I would at least raise an eyebrow. I would feel uncomfortable.
Well, we do sympathise with people who've got mental health issues. My mum, for example, is bipolar, and she's had thoughts of ending her life. It seems that it could be used as a strategy to play the mental health card in these situations, a legal strategy as a mitigating circumstance. And Donna Maria here has put, it's very interesting how quick the mental health card comes up. Why can they not just man up?
Well, the mental health card doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It may be a convenient legal ruse, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And therefore, you know, we've got two hands. We've always had two hands. With the one hand, we can sympathise. With the other hand, I think I think we should be holding a question mark and indeed asking this question that Donna Maria Long asks. But we've also got a hand which says we should sympathise, and sympathy comes first.
It's like the old school mafia tactic where they show up in the courtroom, they get wheeled in with a breathing apparatus on.
Yes. Yes. Oh my goodness, very difficult. Very difficult, because you've got to be human first.
How do you think the careers of all three of them are going to go from here? I mean, can Hugh and Schofield resurrect, and will he be disappeared?
Oh, I can't. You know, you come back to this question: do I want them in my sitting room? The answer is no. And I'm extremely indulgent. I will have anybody in my sitting room, but I would be very cautious. You know, when you've done the crime, you've done the time. Are you then invited into the sitting room with these sort of allegations and this sort of reputation? It's really difficult. I think really difficult to do that. This is different to many other. First of all, I don't think it's about criminality. I think it's about reputation, and it's about moral rectitude, and it's about taking advantage of the public. And if you've taken advantage of the public, I don't see how the public is going to let you back into their lives.
So what's the solution then? Better screening of TV hosts, internal governance?
No, I think it's about a better way of approaching newscasting, of approaching daytime TV. Reality TV and cheap television are two sides of the same coin, and TV production is about making a buck without having to do very much work. So if it's got a personality it can stick on the sofa, of course it's going to stick with that for as many years as it can wheel that personality out. That's the Schofield situation. That's really the Hugh Edwards situation, and that, I suppose, in a sort of baby type form, is what Dan Wootton would hope to be. He's now a stalwart of the GB News crowd. He can be wheeled out and wheeled out. He is the face of GB News. But I think there's another way of looking at the news, of looking at daytime television, and we need to embrace that. We need to have more detail, more analysis, slightly less weather, I think, and you should be doing it. You should be doing it, Shaun. Come on, why don't you make a bid and sit on the sofa? You'll be charming. You've charmed me.
I'm on house arrest right now. I can't sit on anyone's sofa because my partner's about to have a baby, so the waters could break any moment.
Oh, that's that. Well, that should be done on television. Clearly, there's an entire episode. What do you know what you're getting? Is it a boy or a girl?
A boy.
Oh, how lovely! How lovely. Well, I'm on Godfather duty, always available.
Tim, we're running out of time. Can you tell the viewers where they can find you and support you and watch you?
Absolutely. Just go on YouTube and look for Professor Tim Wilson. I'm also on Instagram under pretty well the same thing. And Professor Tim, I think, I can't remember where that is. I think I'm on Twitter as well. And I've just recently discovered TikTok. I'm very hip, I think, now.
Well, you have a great rest of your day, Tim. Love the vibrant colours. They resonate off the screen, and we hope to speak to you again soon. Cheers.
Shaun, I look forward to it. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Cheers. Bye-bye.